Supports will be broken in Overwatch 2. What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, and in this video we're going to be breaking down why supports will be so freaking powerful in Overwatch 2, and why you should heavily consider maining them, some of the pros, some of the cons. There's a lot we got to break down, so we're going to jump right in. Now, a lot of people who have mained support in the past are incredibly curious what supporting is going to look like in Overwatch 2. Not only do we have one less tank, which means the game is going to feel fundamentally different, but there were also changes to individual roles as a whole. Every role has a passive utility. For damage dealers, it's an increase in speed. For tanks, it's CC reduction, crowd control reduction, so they're not going to be moved around as much. But for support, it's a passive heal after not taking damage for a specified amount of time. Think about it like every single support has Mercy's passive heal. So if they don't take damage for a while, they will actually be able to heal themselves. They don't need to use an ability. They don't need to get healed by a teammate. They will be just fine. Now, it's not all positives for supports because CC crowd control effects are going to be mainly removed from the supporting role. Specifically, Brigitte no longer has a stun with their shield bash. Instead, it just does more damage. And developers have commented that instead of peeling enemies off with a stun, they are trying to deny enemies from pushing up or killing the supports with damage. So supports are changing fundamentally to the point where instead of relying more on CC to peel, they are going to be able to do a certain amount of damage to peel instead. So think of them more like DPS light. What they lose in damage and speed, they make up with passive heal, self-regen, and more powerful utility, plus the ability to heal their allies. So in a lot of ways, they're going to be more aggressive than before, and you can exploit this to dominate DPS players. But we're going to reveal that concept at the end, so make sure you watch until then. Now, it's also important to understand that there are notable exceptions to the CC removed rule, because CC is primarily being moved to the tanking category, but it's not true for every single character. Specifically, devs have commented on Ana being a notable exception. She is maintaining her sleep dart because of the skill required. Now, it's unclear whether or not that's going to be the only exception in the supporting role. I do think it would be slightly strange to take away Lucio's boop, for instance, because it's such an integral part of his kit. And we'll have to see the direction that they are going with some characters, but for Ana, she kind of gets the best of both worlds, where she gets self-regen now, and she gets to keep her CC, and Ana in particular is a character that would greatly benefit from having a self-heal. Supporting wasn't my primary role. I primarily played DPS, but I did peak top 500 with support, and I primarily did it playing Ana, and a very aggressive Ana at that. I found my most value by getting high impact grenades and nades and even sleep darts, trying to potentially purple multiple people on the enemy team and swing team fights that way. Where my positioning was lacking and I made mistakes quite often, I made up for it with expert mechanical skill and playmaking ability. I made a lot of aggressive plays, but one of the big problems that I would run into when playing Ana is those situations where I was very low. I would often take some splash damage here and there from a number of different things, like dynamite or freaking Amora orb, whatever the case may be, and I would have to ask myself, do I stay at a very low life total and still use this nade aggressively, or do I play it safe and nade myself? And oftentimes, it was very hard to make that call. This new passive heal change gives you the best of both worlds, allowing you to be far more aggressive with your utility usage, especially utility that self-heals, because you're not as worried as your own life total. Lucio's will have to use amp it up for heals far less often and can rely on speed. Ana's can nade more aggressively and they don't need to self-nade. And in general, supports will have less pressure on them because not only is there one less tank to heal, so there's less of a need to just output a lot of heals, they don't have to worry about healing each other as much, and they can instead focus on occasionally healing the tank, healing the DPS when needed, and making aggressive plays. And that's going to be a huge part of what defines supports in Overwatch 2, how you can best use your utility to have an impact on the enemy side of the field. How can you potentially get a pick off or anti-nade the enemy team, or the list goes on and on. How can you find some form of aggressive offensive value rather than just being a character that just exists, makes little mistakes, peels for your team, and that's all you do? there's a lot more that supports can now do, and they are basically being unleashed because of these changes in a lot of ways, at least from a more aggressive point of view. Now, that being said, supports aren't the only things that are changing. There's a lot of things that are changing. Remember, no longer are there 2 tanks, and also DPS are going to be moving faster, and all accounts have talked about Overwatch 2 being a much more free-for-all deathmatchy feel, at least right now. Things can change over time, and things will probably change as people get more used to the game, but for now, things are going to feel a lot more chaotic. You don't have that second tank to peel for you very often. So as a support, it's going to be up to you often to deal with DPS that are coming at you, especially divers, which are looking like they're going to make a huge resurgence in a world with far less peel and an increased movement speed. It makes sense that divers would be on you far more. So that means tracers and Genjis. No more Doomfist, because Doomfist is getting moved to that tanking role. And remember, there's going to be a lot less CC or no CC at all in the damage dealing category. So it's not like you're going to be stunned into oblivion and die. You are going to be jumped, and people are going to try to burst you very quickly. Now, that does give you a lot of opportunity to potentially outplay the enemy, and that's really why individual matchups will matter far more on supports. Whether or not you as an individual can outduel an enemy coming at you, you have to understand that in order for them to get to you, they do have to exhaust a fair amount of resources, so that kind of puts the ball in your court, per se. Like, imagine a Genji. A Genji has to travel a long distance, potentially even use their dash to get close to you, and then they have to duel you, and they have to finish the fight very quickly because you're gonna get that heal, you might get peel from your other support, and of course, because your DPS move quicker, they can actually peel for you slightly faster. Now, at the same time, as a support, while you don't have any stuns or anything like that, you still have the capability to duel these DPS. You have the ability to outplay them, and I do think that because the speed of the game is ramping up, some of these are going to be harder to hit than they were before, right? But overall, if your mechanical skill lines up and you are confident in your individual matchups as a support, you're going to be able to have tons of impact. Like, imagine if that tracer that comes after you when you're on Zen gets completely rolled. All of a sudden, you have done so much from the supporting role. If you've gotten even down to 1 HP, not only are you going to heal back your health, but you're going to heal back your shield as well, back to full without any need for any heals at all. And that applies to a number of different characters, even characters like freaking Ana, for instance. And now you can go back and contribute to the fight with the enemy down 1. And that's just one example. Now, it's going to be really interesting to see how the meta progresses, and I do think that 2 notable supports that are looking incredibly powerful for Overwatch 2 are going to be Zen and Ana, but there's still some supports that I want to keep my eye on because I could see how a Mercy could enable a DPS to get more value. Or an aggressive Baptiste can have the means to survive an aggressive dive with Immortality Field. There's a lot that I want to analyze once the game fully comes out, but from the outside looking in, it looks like supports are going to be very freed and they're going to be activated in a lot of ways. It's going to take some time to get used to it, and some people are going to struggle in the new landscape. If you are used to playing a much more passive, reserved support that never makes any plays and often just tries to exist and live for as long as possible, I think that you might struggle in Overwatch 2 a little bit, and you're going to have to start to think about your abilities in a more aggressive context. But for now, I think that you should heavily consider maining supports, and I'm also going to be making more videos in the future breaking down why you should potentially main tank, why you should potentially main DPS, and some of the downsides as well. That being said, if you want to get a head start on the grind, go check out the GameLeap website right now down below for in-depth tips, tricks, and advanced guides over everything Overwatch. We're going to be doing a full remodel of the website as soon as Overwatch 2 drops. So you want to make sure that you're absolutely cracked before then. So go check it out right now down below.